So, back to this. Actually, not back to this. This is the first time I'm doing a video like this, or not like this, but on this topic or subject. So, there's that, right? That's the first thing. And I guess also, second thing then, right? Like, apologize if I sound different. I'm actually kind of sick. And it's also a very awkward time, like not my usual time I do this. It's actually like 8 a.m. right now, and I need to be somewhere at 8:30, so this video, but I really wanted to make this video, and I found some time too, so I'm assuming, or anticipating, that this will be a quick video. If not, then I'm majorly screwed up there, but yeah, at least in terms of that, right? So, there's that. That's the second thing, right? And again, third thing, and obviously you can kind of tell by the title, and I even mentioned this in one of my previous Omori videos that I made, in that, I was thinking of, I think of the shipping one, right, where I kind of went over the ships and then my thoughts about them, and I said that I'd probably, honestly, I'm not making another fucking shipping video, I just made the one, but with that, I said I was considering and was actually, like, interested, or might possibly make a video about some, like, Omori AUs, as those seem to be prevalent. And again, as you can tell, I'm following through with that, right? And it's by the title, Omori, AU, thoughts and opinions, right? As what's it called? As again, and I even mentioned that one specifically, as it's pretty much the definitive Omori AU. In fact, I don't anticipate, there are others out there, but I don't really anticipate on going over any other of them because, again, I just don't think they really have enough significance as opposed to this Omari AU, right? Which is pretty much the definitive AU, and it's the one that has the most meaning in terms of, okay, what if the roles were reversed, right? But, so this will pretty much be the only one I go over. Granted, that doesn't necessarily mean this will be the only video on it. Because this is a very, well fleshed out, thought out AU, that's been developing and developed over time. So I'm late to the party, not only to Omori, but also this Omari AU. So it's quite possible they end up making more videos on it. But for now, this is just going to kind of be, again, more like a general conceptual, like, idea, like, type video on, like, oh, how do I, again, think about, like, what do I think about it from that general, or from that top-down perspective, right? If that makes sense. I'm not getting into the nitty-gritty. I guess, again, I'll explain the AU, right? Kind of what it is, what it entails, right? As it's mostly just a character swapping AU, but there are some actual, like, because, again, the AU, honestly, it's not even really event-based. Granted, I think within the AU, you would presume pretty much the exact same thing, or you would presume pretty much, very similar events would happen, right? Events similar to the game would happen. But again, there are some that are changed, right? There are some things that are changed. But beyond that, still mostly a character swapping AU. So again, most of the events stay the same, or at least are similar. There's a couple, like, and I'll go over the noble ones. There are some noble events that change. But then again, beyond that, it's like, it's mostly just character swapping. So, and again, that's why I talked about this, probably the definitive one, because it's just, oh, what if the roles were reversed, right? And then it kind of gets into nitty gritty and gets into, what's it called? It gets into that idea. So, at least in terms of that, right? Again, so what I'll do is, now with that out of the way, right? Background context. What I'll do is I'll go over the specific, like, character swaps and events that, in the few events that are changed or, like, tweaked, and then I'll go over kind of my thoughts about it as a whole. So with that, Jesus, yeah, I'm really sick. I have no idea why. I know I don't have COVID, but who knows. With that out of the way, let's just get into it. So for the Omari AU, we'll go over the character swaps first, right? Because then after that, we can go over the events that are tweaked, or that have changed, as opposed to what would be just similar to what we see in Omori. So characters that are swapped, right, and changed effectively, because not all of them are swapped, just some of them are, but the character changes, right? So if it wasn't obvious, Mari and Sunny switch positions. Again, they still have the exact same argument at the top of the stairs This time it's Mari throwing Sunny down the stairs, and then Sunny dies instead. So that's what that comes down to there. That's why it's called Omari. And funny enough, even the, what's it called? Because it still presumes that there's a headspace that Mari creates to cope with the trauma. Her headspace name's Hiki, right? Instead of Omori, it's Hiki. It's the first part of Hikikomori, right? Where Omori is the second part. So that I found was interesting. That I also do know. But so that's the first character swap there. You see Mari swap with Sunny, and then Sunny's the one who ends up dying. So there's that. The second character swap is Basil and Hiro. So as opposed to Basil being there and helping Sunny, cover up Mari's death by hanging her, right? Instead, what we see is that Hiro is there, right? And he sees, but as opposed to cover up Sunny's death, instead they actually call an ambulance, and then Sunny dies on the way to the hospital. That's the change there. And that's the first event where you really see a change, is as opposed to the whole cover-up, right, and denial of the truth. There is no denial there. Is they actually do the right thing and fucking call an ambulance and not fucking ragdoll her little brother's body and hang it from a tree by a jump rope, right? So, glad that they made that change there, because if Mario would have fucking hung Sunny, it's like, okay, come on, right? It's like, but I'm glad that they made that change, because that's what should have happened in the original. Obviously, we know it didn't. But again, it also makes more sense since Mari and Hiro are more mature, right? And not psychotic. So, yeah. So they actually call an ambulance, Sunny dies on the way there. That's the first major, event that gets changed in, again, in the Omari AUs. That there is no denial, cover up with the truth there. So there's that, right? But then again, there's also the swapping of Hiro and Basil's character, where I'd say, since again, we know that Hiro, since he's the only canon ship in a relationship is Mari and Hiro, so Hiro's a lot closer to Mari and is there for Mari in that instance, right, or in that scenario, kind of like how Basil at least should have been theoretically for Sunny, right? Even though he kind of wasn't, Hiro is there for her in this, and he's a lot closer to her, as we know, not just as a couple, but also just as a friend, being the one person who was also inherently tied to the event as well, right? Since he was there, and he was the one who pushed for the call an ambulance, right? Doing the right thing. So, there's that there, right? So, there's that, right? That explains that. So, but beyond that, what else? Yeah, so there was the switch there with Hiro and Basil. So they're switched. What else? So the next switch, speaking of Basil, right? The next switch is Aubrey and Basil, right? So instead of Aubrey kind of, again, what's it called? Being the delinquent and going off and rebelling because no one was kind of there for her, right, when she needed it most. Instead, it's Basil, right? As we knew that Basil was, even before, what's it called? The incident, right? He was the best in the actual game. He was best friends with Sunny, and that was something to where, again, Sunny was really the one person, even out of their friend group, he wasn't really friends with them. He was more so just friends with Sunny and hung out with them just because they were all together. But he was really the one who he could confide in, and again, so because of that, right, Basil goes off, and again, he becomes delinquent and not Aubrey. And some people are saying this change is unrealistic, but they also forget that Basil was the one who hung Mari to begin with. Like, that, it's part of the issue with the fandom viewing him as, or fanbase viewing him as, like, an ooh soft boy when he literally faked to death and covered it up. Like, he's capable of these things, right? Again, so at least in terms of that. So we see the switch there with Basil and Aubrey, and then Basil actually ends up dyeing his hair black, right? Like how Sunny's was. Again, not as, so again, kind of the copy his hair, kind of like how Aubrey dyed it pink. And then even in this AU, Mari, I think, actually still ends up dyeing her hair purple, so. Because Aubrey still dyes her hair pink, Mari dyes hers purple, I'm pretty sure. So I think that actually still ends up happening, so. Yeah, but there's that, right? What else? So that's the character swap there. And then I think the final character swap is Aubrey and Hiro, where Aubrey is opposed to becoming the delinquent like we know her and like she did in the original, right? instead of that happening, she ends up more like Hiro, where, again, she goes through her, like, period of mourning and grief, especially if you take, what's it called, what would you call it, especially if you take, the possibility or the idea of her, or if you speculate that she may have had what would you call it, like, her feelings may have been, for Sunny, may have been mutual. I even made a video on that, Aubrey likes Sunny back, right? If you take that into consideration, that she may have had, again, feelings for him there, right? There's a better term to use, I don't know, or if that's something may have been there, especially if you take that into consideration. You see where she'd go through that period of, like, depression, right, like Hiro did, and then eventually bounce back, right, as opposed to the original, where she just goes off and becomes a delinquent, right? So, yeah, at least in terms of that, because, again, like, I'd say arguably Sunny dying is worse for Aubrey. Again, both Mari and Sunny dying are bad for Aubrey, because I always saw it as kind of Mari being the, what would you call it, like, mentor figure, like, older sister figure that Aubrey never had. And then Sunny is quite possibly, again, depending on how you speculate, right? It could theoretically be a love interest there, or have some sort of, what's it called, mutual, like, feelings for, right? Or it could reciprocate there, but, again, something to where she goes through that and then gets snapped out, and then, again, kind of breaks through, gets out of that depressive episode. Maybe something with her mother, even though she's a complete deadbeat. I don't know. Again, I just got in touch. Like, I literally watched a video that basically summed it up, and that's kind of what I'm going off of. So that's what happened there. So Aubrey and Hiro switched there, right? So where she's taking more so Hiro's place as a responsible one, and then Hiro takes place more of the person close to Mari when in that situation, right, when she needs it, and also inherently tied to truth. Like, kind of like Basil. If Basil was actually close to something there, but there's that, right, beyond that. And then the last one, obviously, the odd one out is Kel, and he just doesn't change in this AU. He's still Kel. Again, honestly, I think it's very fitting for his character to pretty much just be the exact same in this AU, because that's just, like, again, that's kind of how his character is, right? As I guess, like, he's kind of like the class clown in a sense. Again, there may be some, like, slight tweaks and changes, but there isn't just an overt, straight up, like, character swap there, so there's that, right? So his character just remains the same, which, yeah, it's kind of funny, right? But beyond that, that pretty much goes over all the character swaps. 8:15 now, so I gotta wrap this up. Again, so now that I kind of went over what it is and what it entails and the character swaps there, and honestly, it's really only the one event that changes, which is the actual incident itself. And then again, that changes by, what's it called? That changes by, again, them having called an ambulance as opposed to hanging Sunny's corpse, right? And then him dying on the way there. So that's really the main event that changed. The rest of it's just the character swaps. And again, you can presume that pretty much the events play out as normal, just with the characters having swapped, right? But at least in terms of that, right? So, beyond that, what that comes down to. So my overall thoughts and opinions on it, after having, like, kind of gotten exposed and seen a little bit, honestly, I actually like it, I actually like the idea behind it, because here's the thing, normally, like, AUs are just some, like, crack ship, like, fucking fever dream stuff, where people just go fucking crazy and wild and go ham with, like, all the theory crafting, like, speculation, stuff like that. Again, I think this one actually holds meaning, and that's kind of why I said it was the only one that, again, I'd cover, is it's not only the definitive one, but also, again, pose that question of, like, okay, well, if the roles were reversed, how would that change things? And again, I think seeing certain characters end up going down different paths depending on that, right? And that being a factor, I think that makes perfect sense, and I think that works out. And I think it's something where you can really explore that, right? And there's also meaning behind it. It's not just like, oh, what if fucking Mari did a backflip down the stairs and she survived, right? Or some shit like that. I don't know. But, yeah, again, so I think there's that there. And that I also think, what's it called? I think it's almost better, like, I dare I say, right? I think it's almost better than more realistic than what we actually ended up getting. Because again, I think that I said the whole, pretty much Omori, and that was probably that was the main thing I brought up in the game critique, is that it was completely manufactured, like with the hanging Omari, right? Like, I mean, come on, you really got to be a psychopath to fucking, as a 12-year-old, to hang your older sister. It's not that he fucking killed her. That's not the bad part. The bad part's they fucking hunger and cover. And again, to be fair, that was partially on Basil, but still, right? So, at least in terms of that, what that comes down to is that's what that comes down to. So anyway, again, but beyond that, something to where I think it's almost more realistic, as in that situation, I think you'd feel, obviously we knew Omori felt bad, but I feel like it's almost worse as like an older sibling, right? As an older sibling, you're supposed to protect your younger sibling, so dying by your hand, right? And then even though, like, again, I think it's more realistic that they had him call the ambulance as opposed to fucking hang her, so that's the one change I like there. But as an older sibling, you're supposed to protect your younger sibling, so them dying at your hand, right? Again, and especially if they're not as expressive, right? They're not as, like, let's say, they're not as expressive there. They're not as open there, right? So it's something where them being a bit more closed off as opposed to how Omari was. You'd kind of feel bad there because you wouldn't know what they want. You wouldn't know how they felt about what you did. As opposed to Omori, who, again, we knew that the whole time, basically, Mari just wanted him to forgive himself, right? And for Omori to tell the truth, right? And come to terms with what happened. But as opposed to this, where it's like she wouldn't know. And again, we can see that kind of eat and tear away at the friend group, right? Especially since, again, Mari obviously was close to Hiro, and she was kind of like an elder figure, protective figure for everyone. But again, Sunny, he really was kind of the center of the group, to be honest. Again, that's kind of who the group was revolving around, in an odd sense or twist of fate, since he was kind of like the quiet one. He was who the group was like focused and concentrate on, or for making it fun, right? Having a good time. So with him gone, again, we can see how that impacts everyone. But with that, it's 8:20, so I really got into it. I got my thoughts, opinions out of the way. Maybe I make another video on this once I get more in detail, but who knows? So, but beyond that, I don't really have anything else. So, yep, that's it for this one. See you in the next one.